Hi, Bob Tascione here. I received an email request from one of the members of the Hermle clock course asking if I could put a summary of the animations that are in the course together in one small video where it can be used as a study reference and a quick reference. And I thought, yeah, that's a really good idea. So I went ahead and did that. That's what this video is. And it's not 100% animation. I did include parts of William Porter's video content to help describe the autocorrection mechanism so that people would, coming in for, people that are up here on YouTube that are actually coming in, not course members, will be able to kind of grasp the concept of what the animations are about. And so I left a little bit of a description in there. So that should be helpful. In the future, if you'd like to see any more of these animations up here on YouTube or any of the content, in the comment section, just put yes, Bob clocks, or yes, Bob watches, or yes, Bob both. And I'll start putting some up here. I have a lot of animation already completed for future courses, and I have a lot of video already completed for the future courses. I have to just bring them together, and I can always put some of that up here to give you an idea what's going on or what I've got going. So if you have a chance, subscribe, hit the bell so that you get the notifications, and I hope to get this channel going again real soon. So anyway, okay, enjoy.
This is the center cam. It has 4 lobes. One is going to be longer than the other. Now that longer lobe plays an important function in our autocorrection. So what you can't quite see yet, that it lifts our levers. You see when I push on that, it starts to lift our lever. Right here, our chime locking lever.
This is the detent that William is referring to. Let me swing that out a little so you can see it a little better. And all it is a tab that reaches out and under the chime locking lever, or long lever as it's sometimes called. And it does the actual lifting of this lever to activate the warn sequence and also the autocorrection sequence. Let me bring that back and you can take a look at it working. I've removed the other components just to make it simpler to see.
So
okay, as I scroll this manually in a moment, you'll see the lifting lever right along the lobe of the center cam. And as the lever lifts, the chime locking lever, it will unlock the locking disc. And you'll see the disc move when it goes into warm, about 10 degrees counterclockwise here. And as William explains, that's so that when the locking lever drops back down, it will ride on the top of the locking disc surface. Let's take a look at that right now. Okay, you see it riding along. And right there it releases the chime train and allows the locking disc wheel between the plates to turn. And you see it move ahead while it's still on the top of the lobe. It's moved ahead about 10 degrees. Now when it drops off of this lobe, it will allow the long lever or chime locking lever to drop down onto the disc. And then right after that, it can now ride along the surface of that disc for the chime.
okay, when that falls into the notch, it allows the hook on this lever to capture our locking cam.
To show the locking and unlocking of the chime train, I need to bring the control cam into the scene so that we can now get a different perspective on what William is talking about. This pin follows along the surface of our control cam right here. I'll manually run it through the animation so you can see what's happening here. You can see as the lifting lever rides along the lobe, it unlocks the chime mechanism right here by releasing the locking disc. And it's going into Warn. And the hook can now drop down and ride on the surface of the locking disc. Now note that the pin, the cam follower more or less, is following now along this surface. This is the third quarter. And this is going to keep it from dropping down and locking the locking disc. But now, the slot that William's talking about, the pin can drop down into the slot, and which will allow it's now riding on the disc surface, and then it will allow it to drop down into the slot and lock the chime mechanism again. And now it's waiting for the fourth quarter. Now let's run the animation through the third quarter. Now, what's been shown up to this point will work well for initiating and carrying out the chiming sequence of a clock. That's to say that these components and their interaction with one another that we just covered in the animation is enough to chime all four quarters as well as activate the strike at the hour via the long lever here, which will be explained later. But the important point I want to make here is that this mechanism as it stands is complete in itself and more than sufficient to carry out the chiming in a clock. In fact, similar designs have been used for years for just this purpose. So we could stop here and we would have a chiming clock. But if for any reason the chime falls out of sequence with the time indicated by the hands, for example, the minute hand points to 45 minutes after the hour, but the clock chimes 30 minutes after, then we'll need to manually bring the chime back into agreement with the actual time indicated by the minute hand. Now, for clockmaker, that's no big deal. But for the owner of a clock that doesn't understand how this works, well, to use a modern but fitting phrase, that may not be too user-friendly. Who knows what might happen? So for this very reason, some brilliant clockmaker from our horological past came up with the auto-correcting mechanism and made life a lot easier for many clock owners. So next, William's going to begin introducing and covering the auto-correction components and explaining how they work together to bring a chime that's fallen out of step with the minute hand back into sequence. And I'll jump in with some supporting animations where we feel they'll be helpful.
Now if I pull that up and out of the way, you'll see that it also has this little piece here, which is our auto correction cam follower. Now our auto correction cam follower drops into a lower area on the auto correction cam behind our control cam, and Bob will put up a good animation about what that looks like, how that functions.
Okay, we'll take a look at the auto correction cam that William just referred to, which is mounted on the back side of this control cam, and then I'll explain its role in conjunction with the other components involved in the entire auto correcting process.
Now we'll gradually build the animation by bringing in one auto correction component at a time and cover the purpose of each part in the assembly. And then William will finish this section up by taking us through a real-time video demonstration of the complete auto correction system in action. Let's spin the control cam around and take a look at the auto correction cam now. This is it right here, and as you can see, it's firmly fastened to the back of the control cam. We'll understand the purpose of this cutout in a moment. Now we can bring the auto correction hook into the scene. We see how the correction hook is kept from falling by means of its cam follower riding along the surface of the auto correction cam here as the entire control cam assembly turns. I'm going to turn it back to its original position and make the control cam transparent so we can observe how these two components interact and function. We can see here that the correction hook cam follower rides along the auto correction cam surface for most of the auto correction cam's rotation. The auto correction hook maintains an even level for most of its travel until it finally arrives at and can drop down into the cutout right here. Now let's see the role of the hook plays by bringing in the locking disc. Okay, I'm going to run the animation backwards a bit so we can work with it. That should do it right about there. Again, we'll see this cam follower riding along the surface of the correction cam, which will hold the correction hook up and in place, maintaining a small distance between the hook and the locking disc right here. Advancing, we still maintain this relationship between the two components until, as we saw earlier, the cam follower begins to move down into the lower portion of the correction cam here, permitting the correction hook to drop onto and right along the locking disc surface. Until the hook end of the correction hook drops down and into the path of the locking face on the disc, locking the entire chime train again. It's easy to see now that the timing between all of these components is critical. If the timing is even a tiny bit off, it may be enough for the chime to mess up. Setting up the chiming mechanism will be covered in detail in the assembly section later, but without a clear understanding of how these components interact with one another, timing would more or less be a guessing game.
So we've advanced just a little bit. So that is dropped in there. We need to now lift the auto correction hook up and out of the way.
Now, William is beginning to explain how the auto correction function is activated and how it can only be activated by the long lobe on the center cam. Now, you remember that this control cam follower pin rides along the profile of the control cam, but it also serves another important purpose, and that is it acts as the lifting pin for raising the correction hook up to unlock the locking disc. Now let's take a look.
If I advance over one of these shorter lobes, okay, we can see it lifting our chime locking lever. but it hasn't lifted our auto correction hook. Okay? And that'll happen on all of these three other lobes. And this is the auto correction. This is what takes place in auto correcting. Does not unlock the auto correction hook. Now we're advancing to our long lobe on our center cam, and you'll see, if you keep an eye up here, that we're going to start lifting our auto correction hook. Now that it's going to go higher, it's started to lift that hook. It's lifted the hook far enough to release the locking cam and put the movement into warning. Now that it's in warning, as soon as it drops off our long lobe, the movement will be allowed to function. Okay.
Okay, to end this section, we'll add an animation that can be studied, covering the third and fourth quarter chime.